The silence came first. Deep space, so often filled with static and debris chatter, turned eerily still. Sensor arrays across the Senate moon of Dath Val reported a momentary vacuum. No radio signals, no neutrino trails, no cosmic background hum. Then came the ripple. A gravitational distortion unfurled like a curtain, and from its shimmering veil emerged Peacemaker Prime. It did not explode into view with the bluster of propulsion or the arrogance of plasma trails. It glided into reality like a blade drawn slowly from a velvet sheath. 2 kilometers long, shaped like an obsidian spearhead dipped in chrome, the ship cast a reflection in the stars themselves. Even the fabric of spacetime around it seemed hesitant to interfere. For a fleeting moment, the gathered representatives of the Galactic Coalition stared upward from the luminous domes of the Senate moon in silence, awed, anxious, and confused. Then the hull lit up. 100,000 synchronized LED panels burst into motion across the surface of the ship. Not with threat displays, nor coordinates, nor insignia, but quotes. Peaceful ones. Philosophical ones. Ridiculously earnest ones. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Matthew 5 verse 9. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Jimi Hendrix. We prefer hugs, but our arms are railguns. Terran Navy. Recruitment poster. They scrolled in galactic standard, in the tribal glyphs of the Avrosh, in the scent cloud patterns of the Poliri, and even in audio pulse for species that read via echo. To some, it was beautiful. To most, it was terrifying. General Korth Zul of the Zenthari stood rigid near the base of the Senate spire, his armored exoskeleton shifting with unease. A veteran of over 60 planetary campaigns, he had seen fleets arrive, worlds fall, and treaties burn. But never in his 8 decades of war had he seen a ship like this. The humans had given it a name. Peacemaker Prime. But it was less a vessel and more a doctrine made manifest. It didn't just deliver Earth's message. It was the message. Korth Zul clicked his mandibles. Uneasy. What is that monstrosity? The question hung in the air, unanswered, because no one dared to speak. Delegates, aides, diplomats, and commanders, hundreds of species in the council plaza, were transfixed by the slowly rotating hull of the Terran flagship. Then, all at once, every comms device on the moon activated. A singular human voice poured into every ear, every nerve receptor, every cortical implant. It was calm, genderless, modulated for universal translation, but undeniably Terran. Greetings, esteemed representatives of the Galactic Coalition. This is the Earth diplomatic vessel, Peacemaker Prime. We are here in peace. We wish to negotiate. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't bark, command, or demand. And yet, it carried with it the unmistakable edge of something final. Across the Coalition's various media feeds, the LED panels shifted in unison once more. Speak softly, and carry a big stick. Theodore Roosevelt. Beneath that quote, kinetic lance ports silently opened. The lances were legendary, if only in rumor. Capable of accelerating a tungsten slug to 1/10 the speed of light, each lance could split a moon. Peacemaker Prime had 12. They glowed faintly now, their guidance systems adjusting subtly, almost lazily, as if stretching after a nap. Inside the grand chamber of the Senate spire, panic was trying very hard not to break protocol. Ambassador Vexthula of the Saurians blinked her 5 horizontal eyelids in sequence. They brought planet breakers to a diplomatic summit. Her aide, a gelatinous intelligence known only as Trill, replied with a nervous gurgle. Yes, Ambassador. And they're quoting poetry while aiming them. Holograms bloomed across the Senate floor, coalescing into the form of Earth's appointed envoy, Commander Avery Jean. A human with no visible armor, no weapons, and no protective field. Instead, he wore a flowing robe of soft white fabric, his feet bare on the marble projection pad. Behind him stood 3 android monks, their bronze surfaces polished and adorned with prayer beads that served dual purposes: reverence and combat data storage. Jean bowed deeply, hands pressed together in an ancient Terran gesture of peace. Esteemed beings of the Coalition, he said softly, we come bearing gifts. A treaty. One that offers trade, defense, knowledge sharing, and non-aggression. We seek nothing but goodwill and mutual prosperity. There was a pause. No one spoke. No one breathed. Because above the chamber, Peacemaker Prime shifted slightly, and with it a faint click. The LED panels updated. Peace or pieces. Your call. Terran Diplomatic Corps. Unofficial motto. Korth Zul muttered something in his native tongue that translated roughly to, "They've weaponized kindness." The air grew thick. A new number appeared across the ship's hull. 015. A countdown. No explanation. No ultimatum. Just numbers. The meaning was clear. "They're giving us time," whispered Ambassador Jill Ran of the Miracari, "to accept peace." General Korth Zul let out a guttural hiss. "Or to prepare for obliteration." Inside the ship, Jean smiled faintly, as if hearing the general's thought. "We understand the gravity of our arrival. Earth has learned. The galaxy respects strength more than sentiment. So we come offering both." Another quote lit the panels. "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." Albert Einstein. The kinetic lances purred. Above, in orbit, Peacemaker Prime continued to rotate slowly, its presence less like a ship and more like a deity circling a sacrificial altar. The countdown reached 007. A dozen species began drafting emergency statements. For called their homeworlds. One urinated on itself. And somewhere, deep in the archives of the Coalition's diplomatic logs, a footnote was being typed in real time. Note: Earth now defines peace as a choice between cooperation and annihilation. At 003, the treaty document arrived in every Coalition representative's inbox. It was perfectly formatted, translated into all dialects, and, perhaps most impressively, it was only 2 pages long. At 001, Commander Jean gave a gentle smile, like a man offering tea to a guest moments before the tea room explodes. It began with a sound no one could hear. A ripple in spacetime, a hum too deep for ears, too pure for translation. The countdown hit midnight, and Peacemaker Prime did not fire. Not immediately. Instead, the LED panels across its hull shifted to a soft white glow. The quotes stopped cycling. A single phrase replaced them all, displayed in every galactic language known and a few long dead. Final opportunity for peace. 3.5 seconds. Inside the Senate spire, chaos brushed up against disbelief. No kinetic lances launched. No orbital strikes. No dazzling beams of destruction. Just the persistent, almost polite message hanging in space like a divine post-it note from a very dangerous god. Commander Avery Jean stood in the same position on the holopad, hands still clasped, bare feet still rooted in the marble floor. He didn't move. He didn't blink. But his voice, when it returned, was unmistakably laced with something new. Gravity. We urge you to sign the treaty. We do not wish for violence. The room shifted. Not physically, but perceptually. Suddenly, everyone in that chamber understood. Not intellectually, but viscerally. That this wasn't posturing. This wasn't a bluff. The humans had calculated this moment with the precision of a scalpel. There was no longer a choice between diplomacy and resistance. There was only a choice between being part of the future, or being memorialized as a species that chose ego over existence. Above them, Peacemaker Prime began to reconfigure. Armor plating along its spine split into petals, revealing internal components never seen by non-Terrans. Hundreds of microscopic drone pods began to bloom like spring flowers, each humming with a gentle frequency. A sound engineered not to frighten, but to inspire compliance. Dozens of kinetic lance barrels extended, aligning themselves into a celestial grid. Each lance bore the names of extinct Terran philosophers, peace activists, and controversial generals. Some read: Mandela, Gandhi, Clausewitz, Ginsburg, Ruth. A hush swept the Senate floor. "Is that a targeting array?" Ambassador Vex Thula whispered. Trill, her transparent aide, trembled into a smaller shape. "No, Ambassador. That is 12 targeting arrays. And a symphony in kinetic warfare." General Korth Zul bared his mandibles. "This is coercion. This is terrorism under the veil of diplomacy." Commander Jean tilted his head ever so slightly, as though considering the accusation seriously. Terrorism, General? No. We are offering peace. But peace, to be meaningful, must have consequences. Another shift in the hull. The message changed again. Last chance. 3.5 seconds remain. And with that, the diplomatic countdown began. But it wasn't measured in time alone. It was measured in intent. Second 1. Aboard the Council's emergency channel, 32 species simultaneously launched diplomatic override protocols. Some fumbled through them in panic, others executed with dignified precision. Holograms bloomed with faces and fractals. Everyone wanted to be seen cooperating before the first lance fired. Second 2. The Grand Senate began vibrating. Literally. Seismic harmonics from Peacemaker Prime's orbit created an ambient thrum within the moon's crust. This was not an attack. This was a reminder. Earth had the means to reshape terrain from orbit. Politely. Second 3. Commander Jean took a sip from a cup of tea that hadn't been there a moment ago. Steam curled upward like incense from another era. The monks behind him began to hum. A tonal resonance aligned with the ship's signature. It was both meditation and targeting calibration. Second 3.5. Before the world could end, Korth Zul stepped forward. His armor's servos hissed. His clawed feet scraped against polished tile. He stared directly into the holographic projection of Earth's envoy. If we sign this treaty, he growled, will you stand down? Commander Jean smiled gently. If you sign the treaty, we will stand with you. A moment of silence. Then the document was signed. Digitally. Holographically. Ceremonially. Every ambassador in the chamber added their biometric glyphs. Some did so solemnly, others with trembling hands. One just wept. And then the lances powered down. The drone flowers retracted. The ship folded its petals of war back into the shell of diplomacy. Peacemaker Prime returned to its dormant orbit, as serene as a monastery, and just as heavily armed. The LED panels flashed in rhythm, returning to their peaceful quotes. But now, they glowed in blue and gold. Symbols of unity in Earth's diplomacy. A new phrase replaced the countdown. Treaty ratified. Congratulations. We look forward to a peaceful tomorrow. No further demands. No occupation. No punishment. Just peace. Enforced by 2.3 million tons of relativistic diplomacy. Hours later, a debrief was held in private. The coalition gathered around a shared hologram of Peacemaker Prime, now labeled in the Senate's archive as UNS Peacemaker Prime. Tier 1 Peacecraft/Contingency Weapon/Diplomatic Monument. Ambassador Jill Ran of the Miracari addressed the floor. We have two options, she said. We either isolate Earth as a threat, or we integrate them as a precedent. General Korth Zul had removed his helmet. He looked older, more exhausted. They didn't conquer us, he said. They made us sign our own survival. We've never encountered a species that could turn pacifism into a planetary weapon. The floor was silent. Then came the message from Earth. A small capsule, decorative, almost quaint, arrived via courier drone. Inside, 12 handwritten letters. Each one addressed to a different ambassador. Each one quoting a different figure from Earth's history. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. Ronald Reagan. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Proverbs 15 verse 1. We brought the olive branch. It's also a railgun. Terran Diplomatic Humor. Volume 1. The Council did not respond. Not officially. But that day, a new term entered the galactic lexicon. Peacemaking class. Definition. A vessel or action that offers a diplomatic solution supported by the immediate capability to remove all opposition. Earth had invented a new form of warfare, and it was called friendship. The galaxy didn't know what to do with Earth after that. It wasn't just that the humans had arrived with a superweapon dressed as a sermon. It wasn't just that they had negotiated peace by practically counting down to Armageddon. It was what came after. What didn't happen? That truly terrified everyone. There were no ultimatums, no garrisons, no vassal states, no parades of victory. Peacemaker Prime remained in orbit for precisely 72 hours following the treaty's ratification. It didn't scan, didn't threaten, didn't broadcast. It simply glowed. The hull now displayed images of Terran landscapes, Mount Fuji under snowfall, Serengeti lions at dawn, a child blowing bubbles in a street of Lagos, a penguin waddling beside a research station in Antarctica. These rotated gently across the 100,000 LED panels, soft reminders of what Earth protected. But make no mistake, the ship still bristled with enough kinetic potential to sterilize a solar system. Because this was not the end of peace. It was the enforcement of it. Deep inside Peacemaker Prime, within a sanctum lined with hardwood panels and gold-threaded fabric, Commander Avery Jean sat at a polished black table with his team of Terran strategists. The lighting was warm, almost candlelit. Monks moved silently in the background, adjusting atmospheric humidity and brewing fresh oolong. Jean examined a new communication from Coalition High Command. "They want us to leave orbit," he said aloud. "They're planning a post-human adjustment period." Lieutenant Cora Delis, a cybernetic liaison officer, smirked. "Adjustment, huh? Is that what they're calling the 5-species-wide panic attacks?" "We frightened them," murmured Chief Analyst Anwar D'Souza, sipping broth. "Not with violence. With discipline. They expected a conqueror. We gave them a contract. And now they don't know whether to thank us or build bigger guns." Jean tapped his fingers on the datapad. "Initiate Olive Fire Protocol." Everyone in the room paused. Even the android monks seemed to slow slightly. "Sir?" Delis asked. "It's time we showed them what Earth's version of peace really means." The Olive Fire Protocol had been theorized decades ago. It was the spiritual counterpoint to mutually assured destruction. Rather than dominate through conquest or deterrence, Earth would spread its influence through strategic acts of undeserved peace. The idea had always sounded absurd in simulation, until Peacemaker Prime made it plausible. Now it was real. The first step: redistribution. Peacemaker Prime broadcast encrypted signals to various stations orbiting neutral worlds. Within hours, medical frigates, agricultural terraforming ships, and clean energy satellites began to arrive in coalition-controlled systems. No fanfare. No flags. They simply landed and helped. In the war-scarred regions of the Tauric Verge, entire farming colonies woke to find their soil detoxified and crop yields restored. On the gas giant trade outpost of Varix 8, a new AI-controlled mining rig was installed overnight, reducing accidents by 92%. Even the Kraven AR, longtime human rivals, discovered their failing fusion cores had been quietly replaced with Terran overhauls capable of running for another 900 years. None of these actions were negotiated. None required repayment. Each came with a single note: "We chose peace, so we will act like it." Back on the Senate moon, General Korth Zul struggled to explain the situation to his war council. "This is not strategy," he growled. "It's ideological infiltration. They are making us grateful. They are turning their mercy into loyalty." Admiral Fexel of the Thren Collective offered a more measured perspective. "And what, General, is the alternative? To break the treaty and risk extinction? To show our younglings that arrogance is worth more than cooperation?" The room buzzed with uncertainty. They had signed peace with a loaded railgun aimed at their hearts. But Earth had lowered the railgun and handed out bread. 3 weeks later, the Senate moon was abuzz with its first unified assembly in centuries. Dozens of war-born factions had, for the first time, agreed to planetary neutrality. Galactic law was being rewritten, codified by a shared fear of what might happen if Earth was provoked again. Commander Jean was invited back, not as a threat, but as a guest. He arrived in person this time. No hologram. No fleet. Just him. Robe. Slippers. One monk. He stood before the assembly, bowed slightly, and waited for the clamor to subside. Then, softly, "Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice." He paused. "No civilization can last if its peace is based on the fear of war. So let Earth be proof that strength and mercy are not opposites." A Vrothian delegate interrupted, voice trembling. "And if we forget that?" The panels above flickered back to life. Only one quote was shown this time. "We brought the olive branch. It's also a rail gun." The assembly erupted in cautious laughter. But they understood now. This wasn't humor. This was policy. In the following cycles, Earth's approach became the new gold standard. Other species began developing peacecrafts of their own. Less for intimidation, and more for prestige. The galaxy learned to value treaties over turrets, aid over arms, silence over salvos. No one dared attack Earth. Not because it was invincible, but because Earth had made it inconvenient to hate them. They offered medicine instead of sanctions, engineers instead of invaders, wisdom instead of ultimatums. But behind it all, in high orbit, still rested Peacemaker Prime. Silent, waiting, glowing softly with quotes about love, unity, and sometimes, just sometimes, a quiet reminder that the olive branch was only one option. And the railgun never rusted.